Also, as part of that conference, we're going to be adopting the Hate Crime Prevention Act, including the provision added by the ranking Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Sessions, to create a new criminal offense for attacks against service members because of their service. I would hope we'd be moving forward on that. After more than a decade, Congress is finally set to pass the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2009. It's an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. I know the President will sign this. And I'm proud that Congress has come together to show that violence against members of any group, because of who they are, is not going to be tolerated in our country. I thank Senator Collins for co-sponsoring the amendment with me. I commend Senator Levin for working so hard to ensure that this provision would go forward as part of the conference report. And I congratulate the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Reid, for his essential role in this matter. I also, if I might, Mr. President, as I look over where my dear friend and colleague, Senator Kennedy, sat for decades on this floor, I want to take the opportunity to remember Senator Ted Kennedy, who provided steadfast leadership on this issue for more than a decade. I wish he could have been here to see this bill, about which he was so passionate finally enacted. I wish he was here in any event. But I'm honored to be able to see it through to the finish line for him. I know it meant a lot to him, and I miss him, but I think this is the way we can say to Senator Kennedy, his good work goes on. Earlier this month was the 11th anniversary of the brutal murder of Matthew Shepard. This is a college student who's beaten to death solely because of his sexual orientation. Matthew's parents have worked courageously and tirelessly for this legislation, which aims to ensure this kind of despicable act will not be tolerated in this country. The bill was named for Matthew as well as for James Byrd Jr. Mr. Byrd was a black man who was killed in 1998 because of his race, and another awful crime, which I won't even describe here. It was so gruesome. But it galvanized the nation against hateful violence. And we appreciate and honor the important contribution of James Byrd's family as they worked so hard for this legislation. But unfortunately, the years since these two horrific crimes have made clear that hate crimes remain a serious and growing problem. Just a few weeks ago, we saw, just a few blocks from this Capitol, a shooting at the Holocaust Memorial Museum. Places should be sacred ground because of what it remembers. And you saw a vicious hate crime, and a man died trying to defend the Holocaust Memorial Museum. I think that this bipartisan legislation will help law enforcement respond more effectively to this problem. It is a testament to the importance of this legislation that the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, came to the Judiciary Committee in June to testify in favor of it. And we've been urged to pass this bill by state and local law enforcement organizations, dozens of leaders in the faith and the civil rights communities. I wish, Mr. President, when I'd been a prosecutor in the state of Vermont, that we'd had such legislation so we could call on it when we needed help. The historic hate crimes provision will improve existing law by making it easier for federal authorities to investigate and prosecute crimes of racial or ethnic or religious violence. Victims will no longer have to engage in a narrow range of activities, such as serving as a juror, to be protected under federal law. It also focuses the attention and resources of the federal government on the problems of crimes committed against people because of their sexual orientation, or their gender identity, or their disability. These are much-needed protections. In addition, the legislation will provide resources to state, local, and tribal law enforcement to address hate crimes. And President Obama has worked closely with us to facilitate a quick passage of this vital hate crimes legislation. Just in the first few months in office, he's acted to ensure that federal benefits are awarded more equitably, regardless of sexual orientation, and now to ensure that this hate crime legislation becomes law. Unlike in previous years, this bipartisan hate crimes bill does not face a veto threat. We have a president who understands that crimes motivated by bias are particularly pernicious crimes that affect more than just the victims and the victims' families. President, they affect all of us. They affect us as a society. They weaken us and demean us as a society. And we should all be opposed to such crimes. And I expect the President to sign this legislation without delay. Hate crimes instill fear in those who have no connection to the victim other than a shared characteristic, such as race or sexual orientation. For nearly 150 years, we've responded as a nation to deter and to punish violent denials of civil rights by enacting federal laws to protect the civil rights of all our citizens. The Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2009 continues that great and honorable tradition. Matthew Shepard, who was murdered because of his sexual orientation. James Byrd, who was murdered because of his race. Well, we can say that in passing this legislation, we can say to them and everybody else, at last, we in the Senate, the body that should be the conscience of the nation, will show once again that America values tolerance and protects all its people.